Duty, honor, country dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
The destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals.
Now we are the masters of our fate.
Hey men, welcome back to another episode of the Wolf and Iron podcast. I thought I'd do something a little different today and share with you guys some thoughts that I've been having on this fable or parable or proverb about the two wolves. And I've taken issue with this thing. Now you guys have probably heard of this. I'm not going to go over it in detail, but it's fairly short anyhow. So I'll give you kind of a recap of how this thing goes. It's a supposed Cherokee proverb or saying or story. And it goes something like this. Young Cherokee boy goes to his wise old Cherokee grandpa and says, "Grandpa, I've got a problem. I've got two wolves inside of me. One wolf is essentially the bad wolf, and it hungers for lust and greed and hate and fear and things of that nature. And the other one is the good wolf, and it wants justice and love and mercy and courage and so on and so forth. How do I know which wolf is going to win?" And the wise old grandpa says, "It will be the one that you feed." That's my Cherokee impression. Meaning, feed the wolf that you want to be the one that's going to be the strongest in you. And so if you want to be the courageous kind of man, you want to be the man who loves and has mercy and shows compassion and is generous and so on, that's the wolf you need to be taking care of. Those are the things you need to be about and be doing. And as far as proverbs go, that makes sense. I think it's very encouraging and it gets us pointed in much the right direction, but there's still something about it that's not quite right. And when I first heard this, I thought, this thing is cool. And not only does it have wolves in it, but it's got old Indians in it and everything. This lines up really well with some of the things that I'm talking about at Wolf and Iron. But something about it just didn't seem quite right. And I felt like there was a touch of the white man in it. So I did a little research, and as it turns out, it actually was created by a white guy, not by the Cherokees. Apparently, this came about around the 60s or the 70s, and much like a preacher would come up with a story that kind of illustrates a point, this is how this thing was introduced to society. And it wasn't really attributed to the Cherokee until later on down the road, probably about the time when they wanted to make it into a poster. But that's not such a bad thing, actually. I mean, as far as fables and moral stories go, it's not supposed to be a historical narrative, so I don't think it really diminishes what the point is that it's trying to get across. But I do take issue with it in another way, and I'll use my own illustration to help get my point across. One of the things that I love doing now that I'm a man and I'm older, I hated doing this when I was a kid, is reading about the lives of men who have come before me and studying history and really digging into the resources of things like even letters that they wrote, guys in wars and things of that nature. And I'll tell you what, there are some men whose lives I could put on paper and you could see their daily schedules and you could see the things that they've been about over the course of their lifetime. And you would be very impressed by these guys. You would say, these guys are exactly the kind of men that we need in society today. And there's so much about them that we need to be pursuing. I could give you stories of guys who know what it's like to take a bullet for a brother. Okay, these guys know courage. I could give you stories of men that know about honor and having a code of honor and keeping their word. I could tell you stories about guys who have tremendous self-discipline, and not only self-discipline, but physical discipline. So they've disciplined themselves physically. They know how to handle themselves in combat. They know how to take on the enemy. They know how to restrain themselves, their fears and their passions. They know how to charge from the trenches and that kind of stuff. These guys know about love. If you read some of the letters that they've written back home, they talk about how much they love their family and they're planning for the future. They want to have, they're going to take over that bakery that their father-in-law had set up, and they didn't want to do it before they went to war, for example. But now when they get back, they're going to take it over and they're going to make something great out of it, right? And they're talking about the kind of home they're going to have, and they're going to talk about the kind of children they want to have and what they're going to name their children and so on. And you would look at these guys and you would say, those men are awesome. We need to be like those men. But then when I told you that actually a lot of these guys were Nazis, or a lot of these men were the Japanese of World War II. Some of the characteristics of these men you could find in ISIS or Al-Qaeda, and it might change your perspective of them a bit. You see, we can have men who know honor, and they know courage, and they know love, and they know self-discipline, and they have a lot of the good things, a lot of the good characteristics that a man ought to have. But then leaves us with this question: which wolf are they feeding? Which wolf are they feeding? These men know manhood in a way that many of us will never experience. And yet we would look at them and wish that they had never been born. Which wolf are they feeding? And you see, here's where I take issue with the two wolves thing. Not that I just want to throw it out completely, or that it's just terrible and bad and you just need to disregard it completely. That's not what I'm saying. I want to take it a step further, I think, is what I'm actually trying to do here. You see, I don't think there are two wolves. I don't think that accurately describes what goes on inside of a man's heart. I think there's one wolf. And it's not a matter of whether or not it gets fed. It's going to be fed. It has to do with the substance that you're feeding it. It's not about the wolf that you're feeding, guys. It's about the substance that you are feeding the one wolf inside of you. What are you taking in? Are you just living off of platitudes, off of quotes, off of these sort of images of what it might look like to be a man? Because I'm going to tell you something. When we just talk about things like honor, that can be twisted to mean a lot of things. When we talk about things like courage, that can be twisted to mean a lot of things. And if you're just living on these basic platitudes and you just have a list of sort of character ideas in your mind that you want to achieve, you may very well end up being an extremely capable, an extremely competent, an extremely terrible man at the end of the day. That's what history shows us. We need to go beyond the platitudes. We need to go beyond the stories even. I like the idea of feeding the wolf. I want to feed the wolf, but I want to make sure that we're feeding the wolf inside of us the proper substance. And that means that we've got to be discerning about the kind of content that we take in, about the kind of things that we choose to believe and we say is right, and we're going to allow it to give our lives direction. We've got to know where we're headed, and we've got to make a decision on whether or not the place that we're going is good or it's bad. Because just being an honorable man or a courageous man without the substance and the wisdom and the ability to discern whether or not that honor and that courage is being used towards a greater good, man, it can be used for all kinds of bad. So I hope this has given you guys something to think about. I've sure been turning it around in my mind for a while. Men, here's what I want you to do. I want you to feed the wolf, but I want you to feed it the good stuff. And I want you to be discerning of whether or not what you're taking into your mind and into your heart is good, or if it's just platitudes. I'm Mike Yarbrough. Until next time, keep your powder dry, and may a fair wind be always in your sails.